Next, we have Martha coming up to introduce our guest speaker.
Share it now.
So thank you, Representative Scott McKnight. We'll call you in just a second. Can I get everyone's attention? I want to make an announcement for Louisiana conservatives. They're about truth and freedom. And if you have not heard about Louisiana conservatives yet, you really need to get plugged in. All right. So they're going to be meeting. It's their second meeting, and Dr. Randy Russ will be speaking. We have had him here before, but you still want to go because the environment it's electrifying. I mean, and there's like 100, 200 people. For the first meeting, they had 140 people show up. So the voters are activated now.
That's the same me.
The citizens are ready to be, a part of what's going on. Everybody was, just living their life, doing their own thing for so long. And so now this new group has come into play. And so it's Tuesday, May 2nd. So put that on your calendar. May 2nd, 6 p.m. and $30 at the door. Heavy hors d'oeuvres, and there's a cash bar. And it's at Drusilla's Seafood, 3482 Drusilla Lane in Baton Rouge. So it's about an hour away, but it's well worth your time. And okay, well, you got an early bird. Prepay is $25, but that's passed. So now at the door it's 30. So you can email them if you have any questions at events@louisianaconservatives.com. Okay. All right. The Women's Republican Club in New Orleans wants to welcome State Representative Scott McKnight, the Baton Rouge native who grew up working in his family's insurance business. Scott now works as vice president. Is this current? All right, vice president and director of business development at Cadence Insurance, managing over $1 billion in annual premium revenue. Through his work, he has seen firsthand the role of government and can play in a private company, how government can play in a private company's operations. This experience inspires his run for office and his fight for smaller government, and a free market economy. He's pro-jobs conservative Republican who believes government should foster an environment for growth and prosperity, not pick winners and losers. Scott took his fight for limited government to Louisiana State Capitol in 2019. Since serving as a state representative for District 68, he has earned a reputation as a fiscal conservative who has a record of supporting legislation that would foster economic growth across our state. Outside of his professional legislative work, Scott also volunteers his time as a reserve deputy. So let's welcome Scott McKnight.
Thank you. I'm going to move around a little bit if y'all don't mind, but thank you for that great introduction. Thanks for having me here. I like that bio. It kind of gives a broad kind of idea of who I am, but a lot of what I like to tell people is, I get questioned a lot of why state treasurer. I'm running for state treasurer now after being in a state route, and I said, in order for me to or help you understand why I want to run for state treasurer, you kind of got to know who I am and where I come from. So as it mentioned, I was born and raised in Baton Rouge. I grew up, I went to University Lab School on LSU's campus. And then when I graduated there, I went and got my undergraduate degree at LSU, and then my master's of business administration from LSU as well. My master's of business administration, I did through LSU's executive MBA program, because in 1999, I started working full-time at my family's insurance agency. It was called Wright and Percy Insurance. At that time, we were Louisiana's oldest and largest privately owned insurance agency in the state. Since then, we have sold that agency. We still, now it's known as Cadence Insurance today, formerly BXS Insurance. We are a $50 billion asset financial institution, and we manage over $1 billion of annual insurance premiums. I tell you all that to say that I've been in business for a long time. I've been in the financial services industry for almost 25 years. It's been part of my life. working with my clients and individuals to not only get an investment on their return on their investment, but also protect their risks that they see every day in their business, in their life, with their homes, their assets they keep. During my time, I've spent I've always given back to my community. My family taught me when I was growing up that it was extremely important to reinvest in your community. If you're worried about where your state, where your city's going, you don't have the right to complain unless you're willing to get involved and make it. So I can go through a list of very long of different organizations I've worked with over my time, many nonprofits, whether it was the Better Business Bureau to make sure that we had ethics in business, Coastal Conservation Association, Ducks Unlimited, anything from a animal shelter. I'm a sucker for stray animals. So all of that, but one of the ones I'm most proud of is my decade that I spent with the East African Sheriff's Office as a reserve deputy. They gave me the opportunity to be the first person on the scene when somebody picks up the phone and calls and is looking for help. You see the best of people and you see the worst of them. And you truly don't understand. You can grow up in a community, but you truly do not understand the workings of that community until you go to parts of that community that you've never seen, that you didn't grow up in. You didn't drive through that neighborhood. It was always a bad part of town, or you didn't go to the other side of town, whatever it was. You never really got to see the good and the bad in people until you get on those, put that uniform on and go to the streets. It also gave me time. I spent time on a task force with the state police and the FBI working on internet crimes against children, protecting them online. And one of the biggest problems we have as a state is our problem with human trafficking. And so I was able to spend a lot of time in all those areas and see things that are happening right under our noses that we don't even realize are going on. And the hotel you think is just an innocent hotel that you go to, you never know what really is happening in that hotel. And so by seeing that and being involved in that community, I've learned how important it is to have true conservative leaders in office to really combat a lot of these problems. And so it was through all those different organizations and giving back my time and resources to my community. Then I got married and had kids. And of course, when we have kids, you start realizing how little of your time you can give away, because you're responsible for your family. So I started to look around trying to figure out how could I continue to stay involved to affect policy and still give my family and my kids the time that they deserve. And that's when I decided to run for office. So I've been in the state representative, District 68. My district goes across the center of Baton Rouge. So from the LSU Lakes all the way to the Highland Road exit at I-10, and so it's kind of a long, slender section that cuts straight across the heart of Baton Rouge. So I've been there and I've really enjoyed my time in the legislature. The last few years, as we can imagine, we've seen just about everything we can see thrown at us. We've had experienced a lot of things, from the devastating hurricanes we've seen on both sides of our state to COVID and all the things that came from that. But we've had a lot of different experiences these past 4 years. About this time last year, I got word that Treasurer Schroeder was looking at potentially running for governor. So I had asked him, had a good conversation with him, and kind of figured out that this was his path, and recognized very early that this seat, the state treasurer, is something that I'm uniquely qualified for. My 25 years in financial services industry, my legislative experience in the state level, understanding how our state budget's made and built, understanding how we pass legislation inside the state legislature, and having those relationships inside the state legislature is extremely important for our next state treasurer. As we know, building the budget is a legislative instrument. The treasurer doesn't get to build the budget, but with relationships inside the legislature, you have an opportunity to go help influence right decisions. And so with those relationships, I'm able to, my experience in those relationships put me in a great position to be the treasurer. So over my time, I've also owned some smaller businesses. Because look, I'm an entrepreneurial guy. I like to see and dabble in different investment opportunities and different business opportunities I've seen. And so I've had to make payroll. I've had to make sure that, you know, how to make a business profitable. So I've had all these different experiences that all bring me together to this one seat. So I announced back in June for treasurer because I knew it was the seat that I wanted. It's where I can make an impact, continue my service in the state. I didn't, you know, I'm not, as I told you, I've got 3 kids, so I'm not bored. I don't need any more hobbies. Every hobby my kids have are my hobbies. And I'm not term limited, just looking for a place to land. I identified this early as the place that I could make a difference. And so now we're seeing a lot of things that are going on. You know, a few questions came up earlier about, you know, continuing the fight that John Schroeder is taking on with BlackRock and the ESG and those things. And so, look, it's extremely important. Look, as your next treasurer, I want to continue the legacy that John Kennedy started, John Schroeder has continued, and taking the office and modernizing it, making it more efficient. As we know, every time somebody has to touch a dollar, guess what? A couple pennies fall off that dollar every time it transfers. The more efficient that we can become using technology and using all means necessary, we can save money and through all these transactions. We've also seen some very good fiduciary responsibility exercised by our treasurers. And particularly, like we were just talking about, the ESG investment. ESG is a very complicated, it's a complicated concept, mostly because it's undefined. It's 3 words, but there is no hard definition. But what we see is that our state dollars were being invested in firms that would turn around and using those investments against the citizens of our state by affecting some of the largest parts of our economy that our citizens rely on for employment, and that our state relies on to grow our economy. So that investment opportunity was moved from BlackRock. Treasurer Schroeder moved it almost $1 billion.
That's great.
But I think there's a component that doesn't get discussed that I think people need to understand. It wasn't just about the dollars that they had invested and that they were trying to use as a political influence. It's also about the proxy votes that they received with those dollars. So any of you that own stocks in any company know that every once in a while you get an email, you get something in the mail as a proxy vote. You get next board member or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Well, think about it when you're investing billions of dollars. You get all these proxy votes. So guess what happens? They use all those proxy votes as influence to replace these board members at these companies.
Yeah.
And so they take that opportunity to put the person they want on the board.
Yeah.
Then to start using their political agenda from the inside of these companies. We've seen it happen at large oil and gas companies. So there's a lot of conversations that are way broader than the actual just the dollar investment being moved, which is extremely important. We're also seeing, the growth of cryptocurrency, and you got 2 different discussions. You got cryptocurrency, which I'm going to call the private market digital currency.
Yeah.
But then you also have the discussion of the centralized bank digital currency, right?
Boo.
Right, exactly. And so we see how the centralized bank digital currency can be used negative. We've seen it in other countries. We see what's being done with it. We can see what the detrimental effects it can have on an individual's freedom and rights. That is very different than what cryptocurrency is. And so we've got to have the knowledge to know the difference and know why one's what I call the private market. And look, I'm all for private market.
Right.
Look, you can, if people want to have the opportunity to have that type of currency and that type of investment, as long as you know what you're getting yourself into, then then you're okay. That's a private market thing.
Yeah.
If the government's running it, a digital currency, we have a major problem.
Big problem.
Major problem. And so, but understanding the difference between the two is critical.
Yeah.
And understanding the different markets. So look, we have a whole new generation of problems, right? We have things that we hadn't seen in our past that are coming. Again, just two of the examples are the ESG and the digital currency. There are many more coming. Some that we don't even know what our problems are yet, but they're on the forefront. They're coming next, right? We have to have a new generation of leaders that understand what's going on, that can look to the future in these technologies and understand where this can be a bad thing, but also allow the good things that allow for private markets and freedom inside of our economies. Again, government restriction on private market hurts our economy and our free market. But understanding the two as independent things is very, very important. So, look, we've got a lot of things moving. I want to make sure that I open up and give everybody plenty of time to ask questions, because I think that in the past, who the treasurer is and some of that position hasn't been real well known to a lot of the population, because we elect them and you kind of don't really see the treasury operating in the open for the most part. It's very transparent. It's just people don't go look. You know, again, John Schroeder has been a fantastic treasurer. I have a great relationship with him, and we need to continue all the good things he's done. But we need people to be interested in the treasury as well, because it's such an important component of our economy and our state government that we've got to keep an eye on, and making sure that we have that next generation of leadership that's going to come in, work with our next Republican governor, because he's going to happen. We're going to have a Republican governor.
Yay!
Yeah. Not a rhino. That's right. We've got 5. We were discussing this earlier. There are 5 statewide offices out of the 7 that don't have incumbents. There is a huge turnover in our statewide elections this year that we haven't seen in years. You know, so right now the only 2 offices that have incumbents are Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser is running for re-election, and then Mike Strain, Commissioner of Agriculture, are the only 2. Everything else, the people are making shifts, so there's a lot of open seats. And if you look across all the candidates for all these seats, there's a huge opportunity to bring good young conservatives into leadership and make sure that we're all pushing in the same direction. Now, I'll also say that the state treasurer in the past, you've looked at it both ways. Our past 2 treasurers have operated under both Republican and Democrat governors. And sometimes we have good ideas that come from our party, but sometimes we have bad ideas that come within our own party. And it's the state treasurer's job to make sure that the fiscal soundness of our investments and our taxpayer dollars stays in place. You have a fiduciary responsibility. You have to be willing to also stand up against somebody, even if you're in the same party, that may not have a great idea. And we saw that happen with a Republican governor and a Republican treasurer in the past. And so whoever that next Republican governor is, you've got to have somebody that's willing to stand up and make the right decisions for the citizens of the market, because that's what it is. And making sure the investments we're making are sound, that we get a good return on investment, protected, and are also pushing in the same direction that our state's economy is going. Not just today's economy, tomorrow's economy, because we're forever changing, right? We're going to see new industries come in, and they're going to mix them in together with the ones we've got. We're going to see some old ones stick around and become stronger. We're going to see some old ones die. We're going to see new ideas die. But we need to make sure that the investments that the state is making is consistent with the economy that we have and that we want. So, look, thank y'all. We're, real quick on kind of the landscape of the race. Financial statements came out here recently. We are leading all candidates in this race in fundraising. Polls have come out. We are the leading Republican in this race. And we've got a total of 3 candidates. 3 candidates in this race. 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. So a Democrat out of Lake Charles named Dustin Granger. Obamacrat. And then, of course, me out of Baton Rouge, and then John Fleming from Minden. So, look, I announced in June, we've been campaigning hard, traveling the state a lot, and getting really good reception. Really good conversations from every part of the state. I had the privilege of growing up in Baton Rouge, but I also had the privilege of fishing and hunting the coast all the way from the Sabine to the Chandelier Islands. I've got family from Tallulah, Louisiana, so I spent a lot of summers up in northeast Louisiana with family up there. And so I've had the opportunity to hunt and fish and spend time all across this state. And it's been great being able to get out and go see some of those places I hadn't been since I was a kid. It's been great going to seeing new people or old family that I hadn't seen in a while. So I'm actually, Austin, y'all met my campaign manager with me, Austin. Witness today, it's time for me to get new tires. With this bad weather we had coming in, we were getting ready to get on the interstate. We went to stop at a light, and you know those little the metal joint connectors when you're on an overpass or a bridge. We're going, and it hit that little metal joint and slid just a little bit. Of course, my anti-lock brakes kicked in. I was like, "Yep." I think we've put about 30,000 miles since the campaign started on these tires. I think it's about time for a new set. But yeah, look,
tires, American made.
there you go. So yeah, we've really had a great time getting around, seeing people having this discussion. So I'm gonna, I want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer everything. I've always said, look, guys, I'll never tell you that I have an answer to everything, but I am always willing to go try and find it. So I'll do my best to answer everything I can. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you had mentioned that, it's time for someone with a younger perspective to come in, which I think that's, I agree with that 100%. And I know one of the candidates run against you, whom I really respect, which is Fleming.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have that advantage on him, and I really think you should definitely use that. Because I like him a lot.
Oh,
He's a very good friend, and he would be a great candidate, but that's a plus for you. Is there anything else that you see that would put you, ahead, or do you have a plan that, you would like to, something that we're not aware of that you could bring to the table?
So first of all, thank you for that. And look, I want to say this openly.
Yeah.
I respect anybody that has held office, that runs for office. I respect that, because let me tell you something. Being a candidate for office and being an elected official is not an easy place.
Right.
You put not only yourself but your family in a spotlight. As I think that I can personally say this, and I think that it's pretty consistent. Everybody agrees that we've seen the campaigning and the politics get more and more aggressive. Mm-hmm. And at times where people don't agree, whether it be with different parties or with your own party, the fight has become so aggressive. And so that aggressiveness and that battle really is tough, not just on I'll say me or the elected official candidate, but it's tough on the family.
Yeah.
And so look, I completely respect anybody that puts their name in the hat for this. And we're given the job to responsibly campaign and to responsibly tell people, highlight why we think we're better than the next person. And so to answer your question, yes, I think that we're going to have a batch of new young conservatives, and I think that the mentality that we're going to see from a lot of our younger voting population and their engagement is going to be very different than we've seen in the past. And I think that we need to make sure that we have the people in place that are able to adjust with that. I think that the new technologies are coming. So yeah, I think that there is an advantage there. But other than that, specific to the Treasury is that a lot of people don't know what the Treasury does, quite frankly. I mean, and even people that are politically engaged don't know what the Treasury does. There's the very simple answer that you watch over the money. Well, that's somewhat true. The reality is that we have a legislative instrument called the state budget. State budget dictates where every dollar is spent, right? It tells you what dollar goes where and when it goes there. And so what happens is a dollar is collected by the Department of Revenue. Department of Revenue transfers that money to the Treasury. The Treasurer then has the responsibility of overseeing that money and making sure the cash flows of the state are there when we need it. Then you have the responsibility to say, I've got this big chunk of money here that we don't need just yet. What's the best thing we can do with this money while I've got it in my hands that gives us the best return for our investment in the short period of time I get to pull? Because we all know the best thing is not to stick it in the ground and keep it there, because all it does, particularly over the last few years, is become less valuable. So you have to have it in places that it can at least grow with the inflation rate, and even better, gain more money than the value of it, right? And so part of that is part of the job. But what most people don't know is the state treasurer sits on in excess of 30 boards, ranging from housing corporation to retirement systems to all different topics in between. And so the job of the treasurer is very diverse. And I challenge you, go Google the job of Louisiana State Treasurer. Let me tell you what you're going to find. No job description. I'm serious. Look, while I knew I was qualified for the parts I knew about, before getting into this, I said, you know what I need to do? I got to understand what it. So of course I went on the computer and Googled, just like we all do. You can't find a singular place, and if you do, let me know, please, because I looked pretty hard, and maybe it was hidden somewhere. Maybe I didn't put the right search words in, but I thought Louisiana treasurer job description, would be pretty accurate. But I've hired somebody. I said, look, I need somebody to go comb through the Constitution, comb through the statutes, figure out everything that the treasurer is responsible for. So we've done that. We've started to do that. It's not done yet because we have all these different things. We're trying to consolidate it into a pretty good, comprehensive summary. Nobody wants to dig through 10 pages of a job description, but if we can summarize what it is, we're going to do that. So trying to answer your question in pieces, which is that I think that we're getting our arms around all aspects of it. But I will tell you that what our past two treasurers have done in putting technologies in place, becoming more efficient, is the answer, because we always have to look at that. Anytime government can become more efficient and less burdensome, you take it, right? And so that's where we're headed. And you look at different things. So you got the
Is there anything else that they're doing? Like one example, Schroeder did, who's a good friend, we respect him tremendously,
Sure.
was he blocked the governor from coming in and taking funds.
So what? Yeah, and so
and they had a little battle, and so
Correct.
there's
And
no
then,
communication between the governor and the treasurer
Right.
at all.
And then
so
the
are we gonna have
legislature took that, and we created the trust fund.
Yeah.
That from that fight,
Yes.
we created the trust fund that money now goes in, that you can't touch the principal. So that the interest still can be used, but the principal is there. So, and that is one of the accounts, that unclaimed property account, just like a lot of other these kind of dedicated funds that we hold, are where that money that we invest sits. And yes, the treasurer is responsible for investing that money and making sure it stays safe, but that we get a return on it. So yeah, look, the unclaimed property fund is something that the current treasurer has done a phenomenal job of A, protecting, but B, getting back in the hands of the citizens. And it's a lot easier. And so there's a lot of different ways that we're going to continue to look at how to return that money. From my understanding right now is that it's easier to return money that's coming in today back to who it's supposed to be at, because it's only been out of their hands for a handful of years. The money that's been sitting in there for 15, 20 years, however long, that's harder to get back, because obviously those people hadn't found it in 20 years. So how are we going to, so it's coming up with new and inventive ways to make that connection. And I've had some discussions, and I thought about bringing legislation this year to try and make connections for people, because the reality is whether we're applying for a new job, getting a driver's license, I don't know, buying a piece of property, your CPA is filing your taxes, your attorney's doing legal work for you. There's many, many ways that our information is floating around and connecting to who our relatives are, that we should be able to start making these connections. I didn't get a perfect, I didn't necessarily find really some good language to make sure where we have those opportunities, but I'm going to continue to look to say, hey, we have an opportunity when you're filing your taxes to make this connection, or when you do something with your attorney over here in court, we have an opportunity to make a connection. Anywhere we can do that is going to be beneficial to get that money back into the citizens.
And that'd be all public data though, right? Things
Correct.
that are
Yes.
available.
Correct. Yes. Well, or it could give the opportunity to your CPA who already has you've given them your permission with your private data, and he may be going into a database to do something. He may have an opportunity with your already trusted advisors that may have access to things that you're already giving them permission to use. You can just say, yeah, hey, look, if there's an opportunity to find unclaimed property, bring it to me. You know, so there's a lot of ideas that float around, and we're going to continue to look for those ideas.
1, 2, 3, go in order.
In regards to the ESG.
Yes, ma'am.
Have y'all thought Vivek Ramaswamy is running for president? And he has a company called Strive
Okay.
that focuses on investing people's money in non-ESGs.
Sure.
Is that something y'all might want to look at?
So here's what I've found in my research of investment strategies. ESG investing, solely ESG investing, negatively performs against the market. Solely non-ESG, if you go to companies that are, to your point, strategies that will only involve themselves in things that, again, don't forget, ESG has no singular definition. And if you go all the way to the other side of total non-ESG, it also does not perform as well as just making straight business decisions on investments.
Well, I think that's what he does.
Yeah, and so preferably you're making investments without anything attached to it. You're saying this is the right business.
Right, that's what his company strives
Then, yes.
to do.
Correct, and so that's the thing, is you want to take the political agenda, when you're investing, you want to take the political agenda out of it and make the right return on the dollar, as long as it's not impacting the citizens of this state.
Yeah, because what I've found is in my own investments, I didn't even notice, because I really don't, they send me prospectus
Right.
and you kind of like, okay, whatever, delete. But the last time I did, I scrolled all the way down to the last page and it had the BlackRock logo.
Right.
And so I called my investor and she really kind of tried to talk me out of it, but I said, no, I do not want my investments in BlackRock.
Sure, and I agree with that. If we're going to have a policy that says obviously BlackRock.
Yeah, Vanguard and State Street.
Yeah, exactly. So look, I think that yes, you have to do that.
The citizens are aware.
Absolutely, and I think that that's the right move, because you don't want to with knowledge go do that. But I guess my point in saying all of that is that at the end of the day, making good business investments are good business investments.
Right.
And the fiduciary responsibility is to make good investments and get the good return on our investment, while also protecting the citizens of the state. So where we can go in and identify very easy ones, very easy is BlackRock. I mean, we identified that and made a very easy, conscious decision that our money was being used against us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're going to stop every opportunity that we have to have our own taxpayer money being used against the people and our economy. 100% every time.
Okay, so my question is, since the treasurer doesn't do the budget, and the legislature does the budget, what role does the treasurer play in the budget?
So again, it is, so I'll give you two different, so theoretically, what happens is the governor creates the budget, his budget. He then sends it to the legislature. The legislature looks at it and goes, okay, we either like where this is being heading or we don't. The legislature then makes it a legislative instrument and creates the budget that we're gonna send through the system. So that has to, originates in the House, goes through our committees in the House, gets adjusted, changed, takes a long time to get it right, comes to the floor once it gets out of committee. Everybody then has an opportunity to comment and make changes and do what we need to do. It then leaves the House, goes to the Senate committees. Senate makes their changes, what they think is important. Maybe they didn't think what we thought was important is. They do their changes. get it to the Senate floor, every senator gets an opportunity to make comment and send amendments and do everything they think is right. And then they send whatever they believe the budget should look like out. At that point, since the Senate probably most likely made changes, what happens is the bill gets sent into conference. And and the conference is the House and the Senate send their representatives, people that are picked to go sit down at the table and say, okay, here's what we sent y'all. Here's what you came out with. Here are the changes. And we disagree with these changes. And they go in and basically at the end of the day negotiate and try to decide a compromise between what they wanted to do and what the House wanted to do, what the Senate wanted to do. And they come back out with a version of the bill that is sent back into the legislative bodies and can be voted on and amended and everything. And you either vote on it and move it along. So that is the process of the budget. Technically, then it goes to one more step, right? Once it gets out the legislature, it goes back to the executive branch to the governor, and the governor looks through it. Our governor has a line item veto pen, which is one of the most powerful things that you can have as governor. And he can go through and strike particular projects, strike things just by line because he didn't like the way you voted. He doesn't agree with you. Look, it could be as simple as that his veto was actually a good decision because it had some type of effect that you didn't want it to have, and he's the last line from making a mistake. So it's not always retribution or anything like that. There are actual things that get cut for decent reasons, but it can also be used as retribution. It can also be used to keep you in line the way he wants you to vote, right?
Right.
And so it goes to the governor, and the governor does his deal and then signs it and gets our budget.
And the treasurer hasn't even seen it. So the treasurer doesn't help the governor come up with the budget?
I would say that a treasurer and a governor that has a really good relationship would get feedback from the treasurer on it, on what he thinks.
How about when John Bell Edwards Obama first took office as governor in 2016, he said he was not going to raise taxes. But the first week he was in office, he had a special TV special saying we're in a fiscal crisis. He has to raise sales taxes and all that.
All right.
I mean, the treasurer, you have to prove that, or
no, treasurer has no part in that.
He did it on his own.
Technically, has no part in it.
And he crippled a lot of businesses, a lot of citizens.
So that vote, he called a special session, and the special session addressed and what came out of the legislative instrument was the increase in taxes.
Because he brags about the surplus he has, bigger surplus than when Bobby Jindal was governor. Of course, he's got a bigger surplus because he taxes the crap out of everybody.
Right. That's right.
And that's why we're losing people. We don't have people moving in. We have people moving out. We lost General Motors in Shreveport. They went over the line to Texas.
Right. No, I agree. And look, right now in this legislative session, we're actually that 0.45.
Forgive me for saying that.
That 0.45 sales tax you're referencing is to roll off in 2025.
We could have had Nissan.
We're right now there are bills in the legislature this session that address rolling it off sooner because of what we're seeing in these in the excess funds that we have.
See, I give you another example. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, Disney World was supposed to have been built in New Orleans East. No, they had too many greasy palms, so it went to
Imagine that.
Imagine.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
You had questions? All right.
What are your thoughts on Louisiana Progressive towards a 0% sales tax?
0% sales tax or 0% income tax?
I'm sorry, income tax.
Yeah.
And what impediments do you think are in the way for that?
So I will start with, so here before too long, we will probably be the only state in the South that has income tax, right? So Texas has already gotten rid of it. Tennessee's gotten rid of it. Mississippi is on its pathway to getting there. Florida's gotten rid of it already. And so we have to say that, we have to look at this and say, look, there is a reason that these other states are being successful in getting people to come. So I do think it's a component. I will tell you this, I agree with getting rid of it. And to your point, or your next question, is what are the impediments? The impediments is that you have to figure out how to continue to fund the services that we want, right? Look, I will tell you, Richard Nelson, who has made it part of his platform as to run for governor, had put some packages of bills in place, and he did that back a couple years, 2 years ago as well. And he has a path and an idea of how to replace the money. Whether people agree with it or not, it's up to each individual. But part of what his package and his thoughts are, which he's a pretty smart guy, and he studied this, is that the way we fund our government is very different than the way our neighboring states do. Our neighboring states have a bottom-up approach, whereas a lot of what the taxes that you need to provide the services are generated and spent locally. And that very little is spent all the way up at the state level. We do this the opposite way. We send all the money up to Baton Rouge, the capital, and then you have to come back down and beg for your money back to provide things.
How can we switch that?
So that's part of this tax swap conversation. If you're getting rid of the income tax, because all that, you don't collect income tax locally. You collect it at a state level.
Right.
So if you want to do both of those, you have to do some tax swaps. Okay, and so you're going to have to lower. Well, one way of doing this is lowering the homestead exemption from its current level. I think you wanted to bring it down to 25,000. So you're going to end up paying more taxes in different ways than you do now on maybe a local property tax or local sales tax or something along those manner would have to go up in order to get the other one down. That doesn't necessarily mean you pay more taxes as a whole in a year. It just means you pay them to different places.
You just redistributed the money.
And well,
And what happens is that your local areas would generate most of the taxes needed on a local basis, and you would spend it on a local basis. It would go to your schools, it would go to your roads, it would go to all of those different needs that you have locally, instead of having to go up to Baton Rouge and say, hey, we need to pay our teachers, so you're getting money through the MFP to fund your education districts here in town. Well, now it's generated locally and spent locally. And that's why you see over in Texas, particularly, it's always used as an example. But you go to all these towns and they have wonderful school districts. Guess what? It's all local money. And their roads, and look, is it perfect? Can we perfectly move? No. But what people have to realize is that, look, we're all of us are a creature of habit, right? We all have our routines. We have all the things that we're comfortable with. And people don't like change in general. That's everybody. You kind of find things that you like and you don't want to change.
I love it.
And there's a book. It's a really simple book, and we handed it out to all of our employees during some of the transitions we made over the years. It's called "Who Moved My Cheese."
Oh, yeah.
Have y'all read that book? And it's very simple conversation of people don't like change, and change is not easy. But in order to progress, we have to be willing to change. And so I think that the major impediments are people being willing to change and being open to the discussion of changing. And that is something that's always tough, because we all hold on to the things that we really like about our different systems. We could be a really bad one, but there's aspects that we like about what we have. Same thing with corporations. Think about that. There's some exemptions that are used to attract companies. But you know what? I've traveled the world with economic development groups. I was a part of a group called the Committee of 100, and it was one of the top 100, really the top 100 companies in the state. Executives got together, and we did a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Economic Development, and we were assisting the state in trying to figure out ways to attract companies and to go sit in the boardrooms and have executive we as executives of Louisiana companies to go have conversations with executives in other countries and other states to say, come here. And I heard time and time again during those trips. I was sitting in London with actually Drax Biomass. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Drax, but in Baton Rouge, if you go over well, you don't have to look real quick because you'll be sitting on the bridge long enough. There's 2 big old domes at the Port of Baton Rouge right there. Those are filled with wood pellets. And a UK company called Drax Biomass, who owns that? What happens is, up in North Louisiana, loggers, they get all this wood, and they have wood pulp that come out of the lumber yards that when they're making whatever they're making, 2x4s or paper, whatever, they collect all that wood pulp and then kind of the underbrush when they go cut trees down. They take all of that and they refine it and make little wood pellets out of it. Okay, and then that's shipped across to the UK, and the UK actually has 2. They might have their 3rd one now. Power plants that are powered by these wood pellets.
Oh, wow.
And in the UK, forestry is not considered a renewable resource because you look at what happened when they built the Spanish Armada with all the trees from England. There's not a lot of trees, and so they are forests. They are considered almost like neutral property because they're just not a lot. Well, here forestry is considered a renewable resource. And when those people flew over our vast wooded areas, they're like, oh my gosh. So anyway, I tell that longer story to get back to say that when I'm sitting in those boardrooms talking to those executives, they tell me the same thing. And this is back to the tax thing, is all I want to know is all I know is I have to spend more money in Louisiana to figure out how much I owe in taxes than I do any other state because it's so complicated. Because we give an exemption, we make you pay here and they give you an exemption there. And if we spend more money in CPAs and attorneys to figure out how much we owe than any other place. So to be honest with you, all I need, and he said, not only that, it's subject to change every other year because you're coming in and giving new exemptions during these fiscal sessions. I can't do long-term planning because I don't know what the tax rates are. So they said, please, I don't care if it's zero tax or what it is. Make it to where it's simple, sustainable, and predictable. And if you make a system that's inherently simple and predictable and sustainable, you can attract companies to come here because they know they can make long-term plans. They don't have to spend an exorbitant amount of money to figure out how much they owe the state. That's all they want. Business wants to be able to predict how to make money.
From an income standpoint or income tax standpoint, my husband and I are in the service industry. I have my own business.
Sure.
He's a waiter.
Yeah.
So they don't take taxes. He makes $2.13 an hour.
Yeah.
And they keep track of his credit card too.
Correct. Yeah.
But what happens is we end up owing, like this year, we're paying almost $5,000 to the federal and state.
Yeah.
And I would much prefer paying it through a sales tax where it's spread out over the year,
Correct.
where I have money to spend and I don't have to worry about saving money up for my taxes at the end of the year.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of people are in that spot, not to mention the fact that people who don't make a lot of money have no skin in the game. They don't pay tax.
Right.
You know, and if it was a sales tax, then they would be.
Yeah, and that's right. And again, there's a lot of pushback on some of the aspects because when you're shifting these taxes, sometimes they're the measures that you make are identified as progressive taxes. But it's not an easy solution. There are impediments everywhere on getting it done. But the reality is it comes down to some simple things, which is change. And because we give an exemption, service exemptions and exemptions on groceries and prescription drugs, that was part of an old tax plan called the Stelly plan. Everybody goes, you know what? We got rid of the Stelly plan. No, we didn't. We got rid of half the Stelly plan. The sales tax exemption on groceries and pharmaceuticals and all that kind of stuff, that's left over from the Stelly plan. So we only repealed half the Stelly plan. And that's part of the reason we got into some of the budgetary problems that we had. We didn't take back We didn't get rid of those exemptions that were generating the money that we did before the Stelly plan, but we got rid of the other part.
I thought we already had those exemptions for the Stellar plan.
Stelly plan was the one that brought them
But
in.
I do like not having to charge my clients sales tax.
Exactly. And
And because it's complicated.
Sure.
You know, to have to file all that. And I wouldn't have my own business if it wasn't really simple. I'm a massage therapist. It'd just be,
yeah,
I get to charge what I charge. I don't have to worry about sales tax or anything like that.
that's right. Yeah, it's simplified.
But I don't mind paying a little higher sales tax when I go to
But-
the store, you know.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I'm saying is, you know, you don't mind doing it. Somebody's gonna come up and say, I don't like it this way because of this. And it's to their advantage, which I completely understand. But if we want to go to a simplified, if it's zero, if we decide the zero income tax is where it is, we got to be willing to make the changes and say, you know what, I may not like all the changes, but the end result, and really what it is just a transition because it will become your new normal of way of doing business.
Right, and I know we
And
have the sales tax if it was guaranteed, you can't go up on that willy-nilly, it has to be voted on.
And so, yeah, no, absolutely. And so some states do that. Well, it always has to be voted on to a way, but some states make it to where you have a state and a local component, obviously. We get rid of the income tax, those components are going to shift a little bit, but they put a cap on the how much a city is allowed to charge.
Right.
And so that would obviously be a part of whatever package comes together. You would have to put that kind of in place as well. So again, it's a complicated subject.
How do you simplify something when we get things like Build Back Better, $1,000-page, bills that are coming through? I know the House leader right now said he's not going to let any of that go through. McCarthy.
Yeah,
Didn't he
at
say
federal
something
level.
like that at the
Yeah.
federal level? But
Yeah,
I
at the
mean,
federal level.
we do need to simplify things. We
Absolutely.
have all these, intellects that have made things more complicated. And they're so
It's by
intelligent.
design. It's not a bug.
There you go.
It is by design, but I'm so in agreement with you. It must be simplified
Yeah.
because it's really not that complicated. And the complication of it has made it this
Well, think about
to the level we're at.
I mean, look, some of this, to your point, is a federal component.
Yeah.
Look, federal politics, federal operations, as we can see, are very different a lot of times than what the state is. Because the way we function inside of our state capital is not, theoretically, it's similar, but it's not necessarily the same way that Congress is functioning. Believe it or not, no matter what, despite what you see, the inside of the state capitol, the people in there function fairly well together. We just disagree. And disagreeing, it's fine. We can disagree with each other and we can work to try and get to where we can all get to a better place. And, look, compromise is not a 4-letter word because if it's one way or the other and you're both going to butt heads, is that really doing anybody any good in the long run? Being able to make reasonable steps to make progress with each other, to make reasonable things for the betterment of our citizens in our state has got to happen. That doesn't mean that you're giving away things that you don't want to give away. It just may not be that you got all you wanted at the first bite.
But I think
We're going to go back for seconds, though.
I think the problem is the federal government doesn't give a damn about us, but our states do.
Correct.
And that's why it's so important for us to be involved in local politics.
That's right.
Because that's where we're going to save our country.
And let me tell you something. We don't want our state politics to turn into federal politics.
No.
You want our state to function the way in a very good way. You don't want this to turn into Washington. So if this turns into Washington, we've got a problem a big problem.
And they're constantly trying to take away power in the state.
Oh,
Yes.
and one other thing about our dependency on the federal government for funds.
Unbelievable.
It's ridiculous,
It
and we
is.
have to wean ourselves off of that some kind of way.
Yeah, and look, I think I
Does
agree.
the treasurer have any input on that?
Not really. Look, again, I'm giving you the real function of the
No,
the
I
treasurer.
want you to, yeah.
The real function of the treasurer is not overly complicated.
Yeah.
Now, again, what I think is an extremely important part, and what I think that is an advantage for me, you asked me about, is having the relationships in that building, knowing how the state legislature works, knowing the people that are there. And as state treasurer, a lot of my current colleagues will still be there, and whether they're going to be still be in the House, or they're moving over to the Senate, or a senator's moving over to the House. A lot of the same people will be around there if they're reelected. Caveat, if they're reelected. But I will have those relationships to where, no, by designation of the office in the Constitution and the statutes does not have that. The advantage of having those relationships is that you do have that ability to go pull them, talk to them. They trust what you're saying because I've spent years working with them. They know that when I tell them I'm going to do something or not do something, they can trust me. And you look at John Schroeder. John has done a phenomenal job because he had those same relationships. You know, if you're coming in without those relationships, the job automatically gets harder. With those relationships, John was able to go to the floor of the House or go over to the Senate and have conversations, get authors on bills that he wanted done as treasurer to run a bill for the trust fund, the unclaimed property trust fund. He was able to come down and get one of his former colleagues that he has a relationship with and say, this is a good bill. And for them to take that bill, trust him and say, you're right, this is a good bill, and go get it passed. And that is a huge function. Having those relationships gives the treasurer a lot more ability to influence and ability to be involved than not having those relationships.
Right. So we're going to be looking to you, Scott McKnight, to help us get our education bill through, if, while you're still there.
Absolutely.
Because we're working on education. Does anyone else have a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Boil it down real simple. If you are a business and you have like 30 tablets of paper left, but you want funding, so you have to pretend you need 45, 50 tablets of paper. And you have to raise your budget or request. So
Oh, you're talking about agency funding?
funding, and
Yeah.
it's baloney, but you have to worry about budget. You
Yeah.
have to be with the need of a budget, overly.
Yeah, look, I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. It's an inflated budget. I do think that if you as an agency are not spending the money that you were allocated this year, then you know that you're not going to get it next year, right? And I agree with you. To artificially do it, spending is keeps it up. Look, we have to figure out, and a lot of what we were talking about on the tax swap option. And putting more local government in this than the state government. Now, look, I get there's some local governments that we don't necessarily want to give any more control to. I get that, but at least the money is more scrutinized when you know that you're raising it locally. You can have a lot more change locally than you can at a state level, right? And so I agree with what your point is, and I agree with what you're saying. How to fix that other than changing our tax system and our budgetary system, some fundamentals. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that I didn't hear the very first part of it. I'm sorry. Right. Yeah, no, look, I think that we've got to figure out better ways to understand these agency funds and see if they're just inflating them to artificially get the money next year. And look, and I agree that they are. I agree that they are. And look, it's again, we've got social programs that incentivize bad behavior that we've got to figure out how to change. It's a very similar thing. It's just within the agency, right? We're incentivizing bad behavior because they get more.
Well, that's kind of like I don't agree with John Schroeder did, and I really, really love John Schroeder. But when LaToya was not going to follow the law with the abortion thing, and he threatened to withhold the funds, but then ended up giving them to her, I would have held the funds.
Yeah.
I mean, she was breaking the law.
I agree with that. And
I would not have given. I don't understand that. I don't know why he had capitulated in the end. I don't know, like the mechanisms of that part. Like
So
what
that's-
forced them to do that. I would hope that,
Yeah, so that's another discussion of another
yeah, of course.
board that the treasurer is actually chairman of.
Yeah.
The bond commission. And so that's where that happened, was at bond commission. And it was the funding of local projects that have to be bonded. So you're basically selling state debt to raise the money in a form of a bond you get the money today and we pay it back. The investors of the bond, are really funding this. But at the end of the day, yes, the premise of what you're talking about, the problem comes in is that particular fight was over the sewer and water. Okay, so they were not going to fund the money that was to go in and help maintain and fix the pumps for the sewer and water board.
Because of her stance on abortion.
That's the money that you're talking about that they were going to hold up. So what you're talking about, I understand.
Two different things.
No, it's the same thing. It's just that the fight for the money that they were going to hold up was for the sewer and water. That's where the fight came from. They said, we're not going to give you the sewer and water board money if you're going to do this, right? The problem comes in is that if you don't, the sewer and water board, if you don't go fix it, you're gonna risk the safety and the lives of thousands and thousands of citizens.
Oh.
And so I don't disagree with the fight.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to fight when people are doing the things wrong, right?
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to stand up.
If
But
I didn't
you also
understand
have
that, there
to
are a
be
lot
able-
of people who didn't understand that.
Exactly.
Because I
and look,
follow very closely, and I didn't know
yeah,
that.
but you have to also do it in the right ways.
Yeah.
That would put thousands of people's
No, I agree
lives
with
and
that.
safety in danger.
That makes sense.
And that's why it ultimately gets funded, right?
Yeah.
If that was funding if that was hundreds of millions of dollars for something that didn't have that effect, it probably would have been held up.
Yeah.
But at that time, when that fight happened, that was the pot of money.
Isn't that interesting
glad.
that she holds our children, our babies hostage for that?
So look,
Well, thank you
as-
so much.
I'll say this to round that out, that a lot of discussions, particularly during campaign time, are a lot more detailed and a lot more conversations need to be held around those. But we as candidates only get typically a few seconds in front of people.
Mhm.
So all you really see on literature from people are 4 or 5 words
Sound bites.
that get your attention so that you pay attention to them.
Sound bites.
Sound bites. Look, I'll be honest with y'all. You know what I'm really not good at? Sound bites.
Sound bites.
No, I'm not. I'm not a sound bite person. I don't like them and I'm not good at them. So, but it is what people pay attention to. And having the opportunity to come stand here, have discussions, answer questions, and be able to articulate the problems that we have, the details of how the treasurer in this instance can affect them or cannot affect them, and make sure that we understand what we're saying is extremely important. Now, when we do campaign stuff, we've got to send out what we can to grab people's attention, because the reality is one of the biggest problems we have in our society is people are not getting engaged in elections. They are not taking the time to inform themselves fully about each candidate they have available in front of them. And they walk into a voting booth. If they go to vote, first of all, a vast majority walk in without the information they truly need to make a good decision. And they press the button. They first divided into 2 categories, Republican and Democrat. I have a framework of, at least I know that I'm going to agree with most of what's said on this side or that side.
Yeah.
And then they go to that list and say, this is how many names I've got, and I saw this one the most. Or I saw this word on this mailer with this guy, and I know that I agree with that one thing.
Yeah.
None of us are single topic.
No way.
We may think that we are, none of us are. And it's beyond one
Too
thing.
many topics.
That's correct. So anyway,
Thank you.
I'm happy. Look, we've got some business cards. My website is McKnight4la.com, McKnight, FORLA.com. If you need anything, any more information, again, it's not the detailed stuff that we got to talk about here, but it's good information that's consumable. And we have some business cards that has my cell phone number on it. It rings right here. Well, Austin's got my phone. It rings right here on my watch while he's got my phone.
You got Apple Watch too.
That's right. And you saw me. It's so great, except for that
It
it's vibrating, and
interrupts.
I'm, I might have to start
Well,
taking it off.
We thank
But
you so
I do that
much.
for my kids and my wife, right? So, but thank y'all so much. We'll give you that information. If I can help, if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Best of luck to you. Next up, we have, I just want to say, we have minutes. We have minutes of our meeting, and, they're up for approval.
You need to cut this off.
So I'd like to make a motion. Anybody want to make a motion for approval?